Welcome to Decoding Devy, episode 17. I am Brandon Haye, and you can find me on Twitter at HayB3. And this week we're going to start talking about some spring game reactions from some teams. Today we're going to talk about Louisville, Purdue, Clemson, and Michigan. And just disclaimer, the most details probably be on Michigan because I follow them more, have a little bit more insight on some of the insiders. So we'll just talk about some of those spring games, what kind of means for Devy, and who to look to look out for this coming season. I thought this would be a good breakup from the rookie prospects we've kind of been talking about. I think everyone's a little rookied out right now and ready for the draft. We'll probably get back to that the week of the draft. So first of all, let's start by talking about Louisville. And the first person that I wanted to talk about in that game is Malik Cunningham. He's the mobile quarterback, really had a strong end to last year. In 2021, he was just a hair under 3,000 yards, 19 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Not great on completion percentage at 62%, but he had over 1,000 rushing yards and 20 TDs. For those that do college fantasy in the playoff time, he had a 6 touchdown game, so that probably really helped you. So I think I've made it known that, I see what the potential in Malik Willis coming out in the draft this year. I still have him as my QB4, but those that have him higher, I understand he has the potential. We'll still see where he goes in the draft, but as it's going, the hype is still continuing. There seems to be some teams or some reports that will pick him in the first. Some that like him, in Pittsburgh, Detroit, and it's come out that the Saints are looking at him and Cody Pickett. So I just bring up Malik Willis because those quarterbacks that are mobile and don't necessarily have the best accuracy, as long as you can see some of those traits that you like, it seems like the NFL is going to be interested in those. So at the end of last year, I was out on Malik Cunningham because I just felt like short to mid intermediate routes or passes, he just did not show consistency with accuracy. But some can be said about Ritter also with that, and I've kind of brightened my my thoughts on him. Just maybe some technique flaws in that. In Malik Cunningham, he had I think a pretty good spring game. He showed what he did last year. He has a very, very accurate and throws a very nice deep ball. First drive, he threw a beautiful deep ball to Tyler Hudson, who we'll talk about a little bit later with receivers. He did have a bad read on a pick six on the second drive, where he just did not see the linebacker over the middle and took it for a touchdown. Like I said, he just still needs work on consistency and accuracy. But one thing that they did bring up on the broadcast was that they're going to try to help his NFL stock by keeping him in the pocket more. And I did see more of him throwing checkdowns to running backs and trying to throw short more. So that could help his completion percentage and help the offense as a whole. They obviously didn't run him that much in the spring game, but that will still be a part of his game come this fall. So for running backs, it looks like there's going to be a somewhat of a committee in Louisville. The first running back was Jalen Mitchell, who was the returner, leading rusher last year. It was him and freshman Trevion Cooley last year. But Trevion Cooley, has been talking about how he's had a great spring, but he did not play the spring game because of his hamstring. But he should be still heavily involved. So Jalen Mitchell had a very good game. He had a rush touchdown and 2 receiving touchdowns, one on a screen and one on a swing pass. It looked like he was a little faster this year. Definitely has some of that power between the tackles, and had 3 touchdowns. So he looked like he's going to be very involved in the offense. Transfer from Tennessee, Tyon Evans, played. He kind of struggled between the tackles. if he can't really get his momentum going, he can't really get the all of his speed and everything out. But he did have a nice outside run for a touchdown in the spring game, where if he gets some space, he can use his speed to get outside. And he's probably going to be the change of pace back, and he could definitely. There's a couple passes thrown his way. He dropped one, but it looks like those three backs will all get some playing time this year. It's kind of be all split. So that could, we're not going to really know until the first couple games. But I would say if you're doing college fantasy or C2C, Jalen Mitchell would be the running back I would want for production at least this year. But Devy-wise, I'd probably want Trevion Cooley the most. And then Mitchell and Evans would kind of be just kind of see how they work out, because Cooley probably has the most upside. But if Mitchell continues to do things that he did in the spring game, then he definitely could be higher up on that Devy list. So receivers, last year Marshawn Ford had a very good year, and someone Cunningham really looked for. A converted wide receiver to tight end. He looked very good in this game. Again, had a couple catches, nice runs after the catch. I think he'll be a focal point again, but I think the offense has added some receivers, including transfer Tyler Hudson, who had caught one of those deep passes from Malik Cunningham, and they're using him in the run game with jet sweeps and short screens. So they want to get him the ball at Central Arkansas. He had over 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. So I could see he seemed to have some very good chemistry with Cunningham. So if he can, stretch the field and be another option along with the running backs, then I think that could give Ford even more room in the middle of the field, and defenses could not focus in on him. So I think Tyler Hudson is someone that you would want to look at, and obviously Marshawn Ford is one of the tight ends that I'm really interested in, Devy-wise, or in college fantasy or C2C. And we're going to touch on defenses on all of the teams. The Louisville defense struggled last year, but it looked better in the spring game. Dorian Jones had the pick 6, and he looked very good in the middle as a linebacker with a couple of the linebackers out. So that's a name to kind of look at. And also defensive back Josh Minkins has had a good spring, and he looked to be around the line of scrimmage playing the run, and he had a couple of tackles for loss. Louisville. So I think Louisville will be near the top, or in the middle of the top of the ACC, and obviously the development of Malik Cunningham, and just if he can be consistent, cut down on some of the turnovers, and get his accuracy up, he could definitely move up into the quarterback talk for 2023, as there's the two main guys in Stroud and Young, and then a lot of other guys up for those next few spots. So he definitely could work his way into there. So the next game I watched and kind of took note of is Purdue. They did an interesting scoring system on there. So it was just offense, defense. It wasn't split up into teams like a lot of the other spring games. So the defense would score on 3 and outs, get 3 points, and then if they got any stop, it would be 2 points. The defense was actually up, I believe, 31-0. The Purdue offense looked horrific the first half, and then they started getting it to go in the second half. King Doru was the first running back in the game, so he's probably going to be the leader. And they were kind of talking about this on the broadcast. They're going to try to run the ball more effectively, especially in the red zone, because they're so pass heavy. They just want a little bit more balance, and to be able to. They don't have to be overly, effective with it, but they only average around 85 yards last year, so they want to at least get that over 100, and that they do so much play action off of that. In this game, they're missing a ton of wide receivers: Brock Thompson, Rashawn Rice, TJ Sheffield, and Milton Wright. But that gave some of the other receivers more time. Transfer from Iowa, Tyrone Tracy looked very good. He had a nice 30-yard touchdown on an over route, and they used him a lot as a running back wide receiver hybrid. and he looked very explosive. So he's a name to kind of watch out for to see how they can feature him in this offense. They could use him kind of in how they like to use, players in the past, like Rondale Moore, in the run game and with short passes. Also, a freshman wide receiver, Zion Steptoe. He's a 3-star wide receiver out of Texas. He was making plays all day. He was really involved. I know all these other wide receivers are missing, but he looks like to be someone that, if not this year, in the future. And speaking of the future, Brady Allen, a 4-star quarterback that they, that was an early enrollee with Steptoe, had a very nice touchdown to Steptoe. And then, he showed some nice things. So it looks like in the future, that could be a tandem that does really well for Purdue. So they're, kind of look out for those players. And also in the broadcast, they were talking about they might have two tight end sets this year, and to watch out for Garrett Miller, who's number 88 on Purdue. Peyton Durham is a very good tight end also, but they were talking about using more 2 tight end sets. So with losing David Bell, they might kind of try to use those 2 tight ends and get that running game going there. As I said, the defense was very strong this game. They're losing George Karlaftis. So a couple players that showed up on the defense was Corda Sindor, number 96 on the defense. He was consistently in the backfield and had 2 sacks. And then also George's brother, Yanni Karlaftis, was also able to get some pressure and got a sack. So there's a couple of names on that Purdue defense. Purdue won 9 games last year, beat 2 top 5 teams at the time, with Michigan State and Iowa. So they probably won't be overlooked this year. They returned their starting quarterback O'Connell. So it's always going to be offense with Purdue, but it looks like the defense is solid too. So we'll see where they really can go, as the West is probably Wisconsin, and then, all these other teams are jumbled up. So maybe they can possibly, contest for Wisconsin for that west side of the Big Ten. So the next game I looked into was Clemson. Looks like it might be more of the same from Clemson as last year. Their defense looked dominant. I know they were missing some offensive linemen, so that kind of took some of that. And Adam Randall, the talented freshman wide receiver who I really liked, was injured, and they're still struggling through the quarterback situation. But defensively, they were, as Venables went to Oklahoma, didn't know what they were really going to do. It seems like they brought more pressure and blitzes. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in the middle of the linebacker looked very good, had a nice pass defended against DJU. And their defensive line is going to be strong again. They had a ton of sacks in the spring game. Miles Murphy had 3 sacks. He looks to be quick off the ball. KJ Henry also had 3.5 sacks. And then Xavier Thomas coming back looks very good again. So that defense should be stacked. So if you're in any IDP leagues or Devy, those are some players to kind of look at. So some people said, it's a lot of the same for DJU. He didn't look spectacular, so that's not what you want. But I did think he looked better. They said he lost weight, and it seems like he is at least getting out quicker, rolling out and able to get some passes out. There was one very nice throw to Joe Nagata that ended up, they said he was down, but there was just spring games, it was just a touch. So he might be able to get out of that. But, he had some nice throws, better movement out of the pocket, I think. He still needs improvement, don't get me wrong, but he had a couple really nice throws to Nagata. He's going to most likely be the starter, but Cade Klubnik played also. I saw some nice things from him. He didn't seem to be, too pressured with the experience, on TV. He does need to get rid of the ball sooner. Sometimes there's pressure right up the middle, but he had some nice throws also. and was able to lead the receivers a little better than DJU was. Shipley was out, but Moffa I thought looked good. He was good in pass protection. And then there was a couple nice plays where there were little dump offs by DJU. He was able to get good yardage on 3rd and longs. That's another thing for DJU. I think he just needs to get his confidence back up and just get the ball out. He just needs to get the ball out quicker to these players and just build on rhythm. He just needs to get in that rhythm, and then hopefully he can get back to that form 2 years ago where everyone was so high on him. I think another player coming back, Brandon Spector, he's coming back from COVID where he was unable to breathe and missed all of last year. He was getting some slot reps, and I think that will really help. He's wearing number 13, like Hunter Renfrow, but he's good in and out of routes, and they were missing that type of player when Amari Rodgers left for the NFL for the middle of the field, because they have those big receivers, but not necessarily those guys that can get the everything in the middle. And also talking about the middle, Jake Brandstool looked good at tight end. He still needs to put on some more weight, but he looked like he can be a mismatch in the middle of the field. It's probably going to be the same thing for Clemson. Defense is going to be dominant. You just got to hope that they figure out either they're going to stick with DJU or go to Klubnik and get that quarterback kind of settled and get that offense. But it looks like the offense will be work in progress, so the defense will carry early on, and hopefully that offense can get going with some of those receivers. But it did look like Joe Nagano was healthy, and he had some nice plays out there. So hopefully he can reach that potential that everyone was looking for from him. So last is Michigan. So JJ McCarthy, the talented freshman that played sparingly last year, kind of changed of pace, did a lot of read options. A lot of people think he might take over this year, including me. I think he should take over because he can raise that offense even more. But he is still out. So it was just Cade McNamara mainly. So from what I saw, I was disappointed with McNamara. He's still struggling with the deep ball. Didn't look overly crisp on his throws. So they split up the team into 2 teams, and I think you saw some of the depth issues. But Donovan Edwards, still they're going to line him up everywhere. He played in the slot, played outside. They ran a lot of slants to him. He caught a very nice deep ball. So I think right now still his best attributes is receiving. So they're going to have him as the receiving back. And Blake Corum had some nice runs. Same with him. I need to see more from Edwards running the ball between the tackles. He still needs to work on that, and he just hasn't had that many reps with that. So I'm interested with how they're going to do that. But most people think, and before this game, I thought it was just going to be Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, but Taviera Dunlap, he had 70 yards and a touchdown. He looked really good between the tackles. So I wouldn't be surprised for short yardage and goal line for them to maybe include him. So that kind of saps some of the potential for Edwards and Corum. But even with Gaddis leaving for Miami, it's like they're still going to be heavily involved in the run, still do some trick plays. So it's going to be those running backs with Edwards probably being the getting most of the receptions from the backfield. But I'm still very high on Corum and Edwards. I think Edwards has the higher ceiling. But Corum, a lot of people talk about his size, which is something, but he does run a lot tougher than people would think based on his size. I think if he has another year like last year, he could be, still a second day player, going the second or third round because of his speed and his vision. So, they did a couple trick plays with tight ends. They actually did a tight end pass to another tight end, freshman Colston Loveland. There has been talks that that they're going to try to feature him a little bit, like Georgia did with Bowers last year. But he still has some tight ends to work through. But Eric Hall also looked very good, and he should be the leader there. But Michigan does love with their tight ends, so Colston Loveland would be someone that I might, not necessarily in Devy, but in other leagues, kind of taking a look at for college fantasy or in very deep Devy leagues, because he could be the future there. And speaking of future with the receivers, Ronnie Bell did not play in this game, but when freshman Darius Clemens had a touchdown, he went running on the field. It looked like there's nothing wrong with his knee. So looks like it's going to be Ronnie Bell outside with Cornelius Johnson. I think Ronnie Bell is going to have a good year, and I think you saw some of the things he was going to do before he got hurt last year. So I think he could really help the passing game. Cornelius Johnson, he has the potential. It's just he doesn't really have that wow factor, doesn't make the catches consistently enough, but he's going to be the starter there. And then it seemed like they were trying to get the ball to Andrew Anthony more. So he'll probably be the third wide receiver. And they said they were going to try to get AJ Henning the ball more, but he's more of a good for the team in, the football sense rather than any fantasy value right now. Just because he's not consistent enough, but he has great speed. Last year used in a lot of end rounds and is a great returner. So, but I will say this, after Ronnie Bell and Cornelius Johnson leave, I think Andrew Anthony and Darius Clemens could be, Andrew Anthony more this year. Darius Clemens, if he can, show all of his, potential and skills, he might get on the field more, but I think both of those will be big going into 2023. But Clemens looks to be the real deal from the spring reports, and he had a really nice catch in the spring game. So I think, and he played a lot in the second half. So I'm very high on Darius Clemens. Maybe finally breaking through and, showing that Michigan can feature a wide receiver and has some fantasy value. So lastly, we'll talk about the Michigan defense. They get a new defensive coordinator also, someone from the Ravens. So there's a lot of continuity with the defense. It looks like they're going to blitz more. And even though the defensive line lost Aiden Hutchinson and David Ajabo, it looks like Mike Morris is going to be the next. He's going to be the next in line, at least for the D-line. He looked very good in this spring game. They kind of move him around on the defense. And then some other defensive linemen to kind of look for are Braden McGregor, Taylor Upshaw, and Derek Moore to kind of come on. The linebackers will be, decent, but I don't think there's anyone there, Devy or, league-wise, that get a ton of tackles. One player to look out for that might play, that looks like it's going to play in every asset of the game, is Mike Sandstrill. He was the third and fourth wide receiver last year. Had a fairly good year, some nice touchdowns, but they've asked him to play corner, some in nickel, and he had a nice pass breakup on Andrew Anthony. And a lot of people have been talking him up, so he might it might not just be, playing a little here and there. He might get a lot of time on that. And it looks like they lined him up in the backfield some on offense, and he plays special teams. So that's kind of a player to kind of look out for more on the college fantasy, IDP side. If he gets more play, you could get a player that kind of has more than one designation. So that might be important later in the season. So those are the 4 spring games that I looked at. I'm going to try for next week to look at even more. So what I plan on, games I plan on looking at are Ohio State. Although, they don't have a new coaching staff, it's you want to see how those new wide receivers are going to kind of play in that game and see if Stroud kind of can expand his game and get even more dynamic. They have the new defense coordinator from Oklahoma State, see how that defense has changed. And then looking at Arkansas without Treylon Burks, how everything's going to shake out there. New coaching staff in Miami, see what's going on there. New coaching staff in Florida. want to see what's going on in Gainesville, maybe see if Anthony Richardson is going to take the lead, what's going to go on with those running backs. And lastly, South Carolina, with all the transfers they brought in Spencer Rattler, see what's going on there. So next week we'll look at those, and then when we get closer to the draft, I will hopefully have a guest on to kind of talk back and forth about my rookie rankings. So that is the show for this week, and make sure to subscribe to the IDP Guys YouTube channel, and because there's tons of great content, and make sure to subscribe to the website where you could get the rookie magazine, where there's tons of great profiles, offense and defense, and just make sure to subscribe for all the great content. Thank you.